You know, when a man first comes into this business, he believes the market is a place where he can outwit the world, pull a few tricks, and walk away with pockets full of money. But the market is not some kind of slot machine, nor is it a friendly partner. The market is a merciless teacher. If you go in unprepared, if you don't respect it, it will skin you alive. And I tell you, most men don't learn that until they've already paid the price. Tell me, have you ever felt that sting, the kind that comes when you think you're right, but the market shows you otherwise? Now, let me put it plain. There is a single rule, one rule above all others, that will save your account if you let it. The rule is simple, but the weakness of human nature makes it hard to obey. Cut your losses always, without hesitation, without excuse. That's the rule. You don't need 50 rules. You don't need a whole book. You just need that one. When a trade goes against you, get out. Don't pray, don't hope. Don't argue with the tape. The market doesn't care about your opinion. It doesn't care about your pride, your wife, your mortgage, or your plans. It only cares about supply and demand, and those forces will flatten you if you let them. You think you're smarter than the market. Every man thinks that at first. But let me ask you, how many times have you held onto a losing position thinking, it'll come back, it has to, and did it? Or did it dig you deeper, until what could have been a small loss became a ruinous one? That's what happens to every trader who refuses to take a small loss. The man who refuses to take a small loss will eventually take the mother of all losses, the kind that knocks him clean out of the game. I learned this the hard way, again and again. In my early days, I made and lost fortunes because I would break my own rules. The tape told me I was wrong, but my ego whispered I was right. Do you know which one I listened to? The wrong one. And I paid, believe me, I paid. That's why I'm telling you, a trader is not beaten by the market, he is beaten by himself. The market only shows him the mirror. Think about it, if you put your hand on a hot stove, do you keep it there, hoping the heat will cool down? No, you snatch it back instantly. Yet when it comes to money, when it comes to trading, men will let their hands burn. They'll cling to a stock dropping 5, 10, 20 points because they can't admit they're wrong. And by the time they pull away, they've lost more than they can afford. Isn't that madness? And yet, doesn't that sound familiar? The difference between the amateur and the professional is not knowledge. Every fool can look at a chart, read a paper, or listen to tips. The difference is discipline. The professional takes the small loss without a second thought. The amateur lets his emotions guide him, and emotions have no place in this game. You've got to treat trading like war. A good general doesn't throw his men into a hopeless fight. If the enemy is stronger, he retreats and saves his army for another day. Why shouldn't you do the same with your money? Let me tell you something else. A man once asked me, Jesse, how do you know when to cut your losses? And I said, the moment the market tells you you're wrong. That's it. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Immediately. Because if you don't, you're letting hope take the place of judgment. Hope belongs in church, not on Wall Street. Do you realize that the best traders in history weren't the ones who made the most brilliant calls? They weren't the men who always picked the bottoms or the tops. No, they were the men who knew how to lose properly. Think about that. Success in speculation is not about how much you make when you're right, it's about how little you lose when you're wrong. A speculator who loses small will always have another chance. But the man who lets a loss grow will one day find himself with no capital left to trade. And then he's finished. Do you see why this rule could save your account? You don't need a fancy system or a magic formula. You don't need someone whispering tips in your ear. You need the courage to say, I was wrong, and the discipline to act on it. How many times have you ignored that little voice that told you to get out, only to regret it later? Haven't we all? The funny thing is, most men can't stand small losses because they take them personally. They think being wrong on a trade means being wrong as a man. But speculation doesn't care about your character, your honor, or your reputation. It only cares about whether you have the nerve to admit the obvious. If the market moves against you, you're wrong. Period. The sooner you face that fact, the better off you'll be. Now, don't misunderstand me. I don't mean you should jump out of every trade the second it wiggles against you. That's not discipline, that's nervousness. I mean you should decide beforehand, before you even enter a trade, exactly how much you're willing to risk. Fix it in your mind. Draw a line, and when the price crosses it, you're out. No questions, no hesitation. You've protected yourself. That's how you survive long enough to catch the big moves. And isn't survival the first requirement in this game? I'll give you an example. Back when I was a boy in the bucket shops, I'd play the tape for quick moves. One day, I bought a stock because the tape told me it was strong, but no sooner had I bought than it turned weak. My instinct said, hold on, it'll bounce back. But I remembered the rule, cut losses quick. So I sold, took a small hit, and stepped aside. A few minutes later, the stock plunged like a stone. That one small loss saved me from disaster. Haven't you had moments like that, when acting quick saved your hide? And yet, I'll confess I didn't always obey my own rule. More than once I let pride blind me. I thought I was bigger than the market. I thought I knew better. And each time, the market slapped me down harder than before. The worst losses of my life didn't come from bad judgment, they came from ignoring my own rule. Isn't that a bitter truth? A trader's real enemy is not the other man on the tape. It's not the bankers. It's not the manipulators. His enemy is his own stubbornness, his own vanity. The market punishes vanity without mercy. Have you ever noticed that the moment you start to argue with the tape, you're already half beaten? Because while you're arguing, the market is moving on, leaving you behind. So remember this, the rule that could save your account, the rule that has saved mine more times than I can count, is simply this: never let a small loss turn into a big one. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But in practice, it's the hardest thing a man will ever learn in this business. Harder than reading the tape, harder than picking the trend, harder than holding on to profits. Because it requires you to fight yourself, your own instincts, and that is the toughest battle of all. But let me ask you, if you can't master yourself, how can you hope to master the market? Always cut losses quickly, without hesitation. That's the one truth that has kept me alive in this business when everything else failed. It doesn't sound complicated, does it? 3 words: cut your losses. But I'll tell you this, those 3 words are the hardest words for a trader to obey. And yet, they are the difference between a man who survives the markets and a man who gets chewed up and spit out by them. You think it's easy to sell when you're wrong. Let me ask you, when was the last time you were holding a stock, it started slipping, and instead of selling you said to yourself, it's only a little move, it'll come back, didn't you? And didn't it slip a little more, until you found yourself wishing instead of acting? I learned early in the bucket shops that hesitation is fatal. Those shops didn't forgive mistakes. If you bought and it ticked down against you, and you held on, you were dead meat. The ticker never lied, and the tape never cared about your hopes. So I trained myself to cut the moment the trade went sour. But training yourself doesn't mean you're immune. Even I fell back into the trap more than once, thinking I was smarter, thinking this time was different. And each time, the market took my money to remind me of the rule. Tell me, haven't you had that same reminder when you swore you'd never break discipline again? The strange thing is, men will accept the idea of profits running, but they choke on the idea of cutting losses. Human nature rebels against it. We hate admitting we were wrong. We'd rather argue with the market than take a small slap. But that small slap is nothing compared to the knockout punch that follows if you don't act. Cutting a loss is like paying insurance on your capital. You grumble about the cost, but it saves your neck when the fire comes. The question is, do you have the courage to pay that small premium every time the tape tells you you're wrong? Think about the way gamblers behave. A man at the card table doesn't like folding his hand. He wants to stay in, see the next card, chase the pot. But the wise player knows that folding is not weakness, it's survival. In speculation, cutting a loss is folding a bad hand. Do you keep playing a hand you know is weak just because you already put money in the pot? Or do you walk away, save your chips, and wait for a better hand? The market is the same. The only difference is, the market's stakes are higher, and it shows no mercy for stubborn men. I've seen traders go under not because they lacked knowledge, but because they couldn't take a loss. They'd let a stock fall 5 points, then 10, then 20, telling themselves, it'll come back. And maybe once or twice it did, and that only encouraged the bad habit. But one day it didn't, and that was the end of them. A man can afford to be wrong many times if he cuts his losses quick. But one big mistake, left to grow, can wipe out years of careful work. Isn't that a fact you've seen yourself, either in your own account or in someone else's? The key is speed. Don't give your losses time to breathe. Don't give them a chance to multiply. A stock doesn't care that you're watching it, hoping it'll reverse. It will go where it wants to go, with or without your consent. That's why hesitation kills. The tape says you're wrong, and every second you delay is another dollar slipping away. You must learn to be like a soldier under fire. When the order comes, you move instantly. No debating, no looking back. Just act. Can you imagine what would happen to an army if every soldier argued with the order before obeying? They'd be wiped out. It's the same with your money. Now, don't think cutting losses makes you weak. It makes you strong. It means you're disciplined enough to control your worst enemy yourself. Cutting a loss is not about the money. It's about your state of mind. A small loss taken quickly clears your head. It keeps you ready for the next opportunity, but a loss held onto clogs your thinking. It gnaws at you, makes you second-guess every move, keeps you tied to a trade that has already proven you wrong. Tell me honestly, have you ever sat there watching a losing position, unable to take your eyes off it, while other opportunities passed you by? That's the cost of not cutting quickly. It's not just the money, it's the opportunity cost of being chained to a corpse. I'll tell you what I use to remind myself: a stock doesn't know you own it. It doesn't care. It has no obligation to move your way just because you've bought it. Men fool themselves into thinking the market owes them something. But the market owes you nothing. It will take your money the moment you give it a chance. Cutting a loss quick is the way you protect yourself from that indifference. You admit the market is bigger than you, and you step aside before it rolls over you. That isn't weakness, that's wisdom, and wisdom is rare in speculation. Picture a doctor. When he sees infection spreading in a limb, he doesn't wait around, hoping it heals on its own. He cuts it out before it poisons the whole body. Your account is the body, your bad trade is the infection. The longer you leave it, the worse it gets. But most men wait, and by the time they act, it's too late. How many times have you let an infection grow, thinking you could nurse it back, only to watch it spread until it crippled you? Isn't it the same in trading as it is in medicine? A trader who cannot cut losses will eventually find himself without capital, and without capital, he is no longer a trader. He is an ex-trader, a man who once speculated. Do you want to be that man, looking back on what you could have done differently, all because you couldn't obey one simple rule? Or do you want to be the man who survives, who keeps his powder dry, who lives to fight another day? The choice comes every time you place a trade, and the choice is always the same: will you cut quick, or will you cling? The irony is, once you've mastered cutting losses, you find peace. You stop fearing the market. A loss doesn't scare you anymore, because you know it won't be big enough to kill you. You stop praying over your trades, stop hoping, stop begging the tape to turn your way. You trade with clear eyes, ready to accept whatever comes. And that calmness, that discipline, is what allows you to catch the real moves when they come. Because make no mistake, the big profits are only possible when you're free of big losses. Every great fortune in Wall Street has been built by a man who knew how to take a small loss. Don't believe me? Look into the history of the great operators. Not one of them escaped without losses. The difference was, they cut them before they grew into ruin. That's why they survived. And that's why the small operator, the public, always loses. They refuse to cut. They hold on, they hope, they pray, and they get buried. Don't be the public. Don't be the man who hands his money over because he couldn't obey the simplest rule of all. Now let me ask you again, are you willing to cut losses quickly, without hesitation? Or are you still hoping the market will forgive your stubbornness? Because I can promise you it won't. Survival comes before profit. Protect your capital first. That is the foundation, the cornerstone, the beginning and end of speculation. Without capital, you are nothing but a bystander, a man watching the game instead of playing it. With capital, you always have another chance, another opportunity, another swing at the pitch. But the moment you let your capital slip through your fingers, the game is over, and no amount of cleverness or courage will save you. Tell me, what good is the best trade setup in the world if you have no money left to take it? Most men come into the market with their eyes fixed on profit. They want to double their stake, to hit a home run, to turn a small roll into a fortune overnight. They think first about what they might gain, never about what they might lose. And that mistake, that blindness, destroys more traders than anything else. A man who thinks only of profit will gamble, he will overtrade, he will chase, he will take chances that have no business being taken. And sooner or later, those habits will ruin him. A man who thinks of survival first, who guards his capital like a soldier guards his ammunition, will live to see many campaigns. And in those campaigns, he will find his profits. Doesn't that sound like common sense? Then why do so few obey it? Let me tell you, I've seen fortunes made and lost. I've seen bright young men with more brains than sense go broke because they thought they were invincible. They bet too heavy, they risked too much, they forgot that the market is always bigger than any man, and the market punished them for it. I've also seen careful, disciplined men who never swung for the fences, who never risked their entire roll on a single throw, build steady fortunes because they stayed in the game long enough for opportunity to knock. Which man do you want to be, the one who burned fast and bright before vanishing, or the one who lasted through the storms and built something that endured? The truth is, the market is a war of attrition. It is not the cleverest who win, nor the boldest, but the ones who survive. Every operator, no matter how skilled, will take losses. That is part of the business. But only the operator who protects his stake, who never risks it all on one idea, can recover from those losses. A man who risks too much is like a soldier who charges with no reserve. If he wins, he looks like a hero. But if he loses, he's finished. Would you rather depend on luck or on survival? I've always said that money is the trader's tools of the trade. A carpenter needs his hammer, a blacksmith his anvil, a sailor his ship. The speculator needs capital. Lose it, and you're out of business. Protect it, and you can always fight another day. That's why survival comes before profit. Because profit is the reward of survival, not the other way around. A dead man can't fight, and a broke man can't trade. How many men do you know who were brilliant in the market for a season, but vanished when the tide turned because they had no capital left to withstand the storm? Now, survival doesn't just mean cutting losses. It means position sizing. It means never putting yourself in a place where one trade can ruin you. Too many men think the market is a place to make a killing. They want to bet big, to put it all on one throw of the dice. That's not speculation, that's suicide. A real speculator spreads his risks, keeps his losses small, and always holds something back. He never goes all in, no matter how certain he feels. Because certainty is an illusion in this business. The moment you think you can't lose, you're already halfway to disaster. Have you ever noticed that your biggest losses come from the trades you felt most certain about? Capital protection also means knowing when not to trade. Sometimes the market is too cloudy, too erratic, too uncertain. The amateur feels he must always be in, always playing. The professional knows better. He sits on his hands, holds his capital safe, and waits for the right moment. Doing nothing is sometimes the best protection. Money saved is as good as money earned, especially when the odds are against you. Can you recall the times you stayed out of the market and later saw how much trouble you avoided? That was survival at work, and it saved your account, just as surely as a well-timed trade. Think of the old saying, keep your powder dry. That was advice from the battlefield, but it applies to Wall Street just as well. If you waste your powder on every shot, you'll have nothing left when the real fight begins. Your capital is your powder. Don't waste it on weak trades, on hunches, on tips, on guesses. Save it for the times when the odds are in your favor, when the market is clear, when the big move is underway. If you have no powder then, you'll watch the victory go to another man. Haven't you ever sat on the sidelines, broke from foolish trades, just as the big move you'd been waiting for finally began? That's what happens to men who think profit before survival. Another thing about survival, it keeps your mind steady. When your capital is safe, you think clearly, you act with reason. You can plan and execute without panic. But when your capital is thin, when you've risked too much, your nerves betray you. Every tick feels like life or death. You can't think straight, you can't act boldly when you should, and you can't cut losses when you must. You're paralyzed because every move threatens to wipe you out. Protecting your capital is protecting your state of mind. Isn't a clear head worth more than a desperate gamble? Men often ask me, how do I grow my account? I always answer, by not losing it. Growth comes naturally when you've survived long enough to catch the big trends. But you'll never get to the big trend if you've blown up your account before it arrives. Profit is not a goal you chase directly. Profit is what happens when you survive long enough and position yourself wisely enough to take advantage of the inevitable moves the market always brings. Survival first, profit second. That order never changes. Break it, and you'll learn the hard way. Let's put it in simple terms. Would you rather make $10,000 this month and lose it all the next? Or would you rather grind slowly, preserving your capital, and grow it steadily over time? Most men will choose the quick 10,000 because human nature is greedy and impatient. But the man who chooses steady growth, who puts survival before profit, will be the man who still has an account 10 years from now. That is the man who builds wealth, not just winnings. Survival also means humility. It means recognizing that the market is always stronger than you, that you can be wrong at any moment. A man who seeks only profit is proud, arrogant, blind to danger. A man who seeks survival is cautious, alert, always ready to step aside when the tide shifts. Which attitude do you think the market rewards? Haven't you noticed that the minute you get cocky, the market has a way of knocking you down? The public loves stories of big wins, of fortunes made overnight. But they never tell you the other side, the countless men who went broke chasing those same dreams. The real story of Wall Street is not the man who made millions in a single trade, but the man who preserved his stake through thick and thin, through panics and booms, through crashes and manias. That man may never make the headlines, but he will still be standing when the headlines fade. That is the power of putting survival before profit. So I say it again, because it cannot be said too often. Survival comes before profit. Protect your capital first. That is the rule, the eternal truth of speculation. Discipline separates the professional from the amateur. That is the line drawn in speculation, clearer than any chart or tape, sharper than any price move. It isn't intelligence, it isn't luck, it isn't even knowledge that divides the two, it's discipline. Every man can study the market, every man can learn the rules, every man can read the papers and listen to the tips, but very few can master themselves, and that is why so many fail. The market is not a puzzle waiting for the cleverest head to solve it. It's a battlefield, and the soldier who survives is not always the one with the sharpest sword, but the one who obeys discipline when the bullets start flying. Tell me, haven't you ever known what the right move was, but lacked the discipline to do it? The amateur thinks the game is about brilliance, about spotting something no one else can see. He looks for shortcuts, for secrets, for ways to beat the crowd. The professional knows the truth, the crowd is always there, the market is always stronger, and the only edge he has is his own discipline. When the tape says out, the professional sells, no matter how much he wishes otherwise. When the trend is right, he holds, no matter how much his nerves itch to take a quick profit. The amateur lets fear and greed push him around like a toy boat in the tide. The professional rides the tide because his discipline keeps him steady. Which one do you think lasts longer in this game? Discipline means doing what you said you would do, not what you feel like doing. Feelings have ruined more traders than bad judgment ever did. A man feels hopeful, so he holds a loser. He feels nervous, so he sells a winner too soon. He feels greedy, so he doubles up at the worst possible time. And all the while he ignores the rules he knows in his head. The professional doesn't trust feelings. He trusts rules. He trusts systems. He trusts the discipline that has carried him through storms before. You might ask, what's harder, knowing the rule or obeying it? Haven't you noticed that most traders already know what they should have done after the fact? Let me tell you something about this business. It will always tempt you to break your rules. The market whispers in your ear. It teases you. It makes you believe this one time is different. Hold on just a little longer, it says. Sell now. Take the quick profit, don't wait. And if you're undisciplined, you'll listen, because it's easier to follow your impulses than your plan. But the market punishes every lapse. It forgives nothing. Discipline is the only armor you have against its tricks. Do you remember a time when you broke your own rules and paid for it? Didn't it sting worse because you knew better all along? The professional sets rules before the trade ever begins. He decides where to enter, where to exit, how much to risk. He fixes it in his mind, and when the moment comes, he acts without hesitation. The amateur decides on the fly. He waits to see how he feels when the price moves. He waits to see if the market will be kind. And because of that, he is always at the mercy of the tape, never in control of himself. A man without discipline is a leaf in the wind. A man with discipline is a tree he may bend, but he does not break. Which one are you when the market turns rough? Discipline is also patience. It's the ability to wait for the right setup, the right market, the right moment. Amateurs crave action. They think being in the market all the time is the way to make money. They fear missing out more than they fear losing. Professionals know better. They can sit quietly, watch, and wait. They know the big money comes in the big swing, and the big swing only comes once in a while. Without discipline, you'll waste your capital on noise, chasing every shadow, leaving yourself empty when the real move arrives. Haven't you ever regretted wasting your bullets before the real battle even began? Another face of discipline is courage, not the reckless kind, not the gambler's bravado, but the steady courage to follow your rule even when it hurts. It hurts to cut a loss. It hurts to sit on your hands while others boast of quick wins. It hurts to hold through a profit while every instinct screams to grab it before it disappears. Discipline is the strength to endure those hurts because you know the long game. The amateur avoids pain by breaking his rules, and in the end, that avoidance costs him far more. The professional accepts pain as the price of survival. Isn't that the truth in every field? Discipline today, reward tomorrow. I've known traders who had every advantage: capital, connections, even inside tips, and they still lost it all because they had no discipline. And I've known men with small stakes, no influence, nothing but grit, who survived and grew rich because they obeyed their rules no matter what. This business does not reward the cleverest or the best connected. It rewards the man who can master himself. Discipline is self-mastery, and without it, no amount of knowledge will save you. Have you ever noticed how the market seems designed to expose your weakest habit? If you're greedy, it teases you. If you're fearful, it spooks you. If you're proud, it humbles you. The market finds your weakness. Only discipline can protect you. Think about the tape. It has no emotions, no feelings, no pride. It simply moves. The amateur reacts to every tick, every wiggle, like a nervous dog. The professional watches calmly, waits for the signal, obeys his rule. The difference isn't in intelligence, it's in discipline. That's why the amateur always feels anxious, while the professional feels calm. Anxiety comes from lack of control, and lack of control comes from lack of discipline. You want peace of mind in the market. Then build discipline, because nothing else will give it to you. Discipline also means consistency. Anyone can be disciplined for a day, a week, a trade. But the market doesn't test you once. It tests you every day, in every trade, for years. Can you obey your rule not once, not twice, but 10,000 times? That is what separates the professional from the amateur. The amateur thinks discipline is a switch he can turn on and off. The professional knows it is a habit, a way of life. The amateur obeys when it's easy and abandons it when it's hard. The professional obeys especially when it's hard. Which one do you think earns the right to call himself a trader? Discipline is also about protecting your mental capital. Every time you break a rule, even if you get away with it, you weaken yourself. You teach yourself that discipline can be bent, that rules can be broken, that luck can save you, and sooner or later, that habit will destroy you. Every time you obey, even if it costs you, you strengthen yourself. You build the habit, the muscle, the reflex of discipline. And that reflex is what saves you when the market storms rage. Tell me, which habit are you building in your own trading, the habit of breaking rules, or the habit of obeying them? The professional understands that the market is uncertain, but his behavior must never be uncertain. The amateur believes certainty lies in predicting prices. The professional knows certainty lies only in discipline. You cannot control the market, but you can control yourself. And that control is the only edge you will ever have.